Mismatch asymmetry in VP ellipsis. My name is Sun-Woong Kim from Gwangwon University. This presentation primarily aims to explain the asymmetry of category mismatch in VP ellipsis and to argue that the simple set theoretic inclusion or structural containment comparison between antecedent phrase and the elided phrase is neither sufficient nor necessary to deal with mismatch in ellipsis. To begin with, the reason is explored for why the antecedent noun can trigger VP ellipsis in the subsequent clause, while the antecedent verb rarely triggers NP ellipsis in the subsequent clause. Sato, 2018. Compare 1a and 1. Compare examples in 1 and those in 2. Okay. 1a examples are good, but 2 examples are quite bad. Why is N2 VP ellipsis more frequent than V2 NP ellipsis? In 1, the noun participation or survival and convict trigger VP ellipsis, but in 2, the verb graduate and convict do not trigger NP ellipsis. This paper looks for a syntactic answer to the question in the dynamicity of phrases, which was proposed by Boscovich and Dendikin independently in their papers and books. Okay, section 2, mismatch in ellipsis. How big a mismatch is endured in ellipsis between the antecedent phrase and the elided phrase? One possible set of consideration would include morphological mismatch, voice mismatch, polarity mismatch, and type mismatch, as was pointed out by Merchant and Cranenbrook 2013. The morphological mismatch examples are given in 3, and other examples are given below, but let me skip them for sake of time. And let me directly go to the matter of category mismatch. Section 2.2 and to VP ellipsis is a case of category mismatch. As was introduced above, nouns can trigger VP ellipsis in the subsequent clause. Below we see additional examples from Hart 1993 in 10, and more examples are abundant. Examples are given in 11 are from Miller and Hanford 2014. And this kind of category mismatch in and to VP ellipsis, however, is not always possible. As was pointed out by Miller and Hanford 2014, and examples in 2012, Mubarak's answer was impossible to predict. We wonder why he did. According to, depending on the different interpretations, 12a can be good or can be illicit, as is marked by the pound mark. The above examples are not felicitous. The nominal answer and participation in the first clause does not guarantee a VP ellipsis in the second clause, in contrast to 10 to 11. The question is, how come they are different? According to Miller and Hanford, the difference lies in the polarity of the nominals and the consideration. Now compare 11 and 13. In 13, that demands on his answer. He does. This second clause means that it depends on what he answers, not on whether or not he answers. In nominals in 11 is taken as a yes-no question. In 11a, the nominal is understood as whether or not he will participate. In contrast, the examples in 13 are understood not about choice, but about particular information. In 13a, the nominal answer is interpreted as what he answers, but not as whether or not he answers. The nominal in 11 involve the notion of polarity between yes or no, while those in 13 does not. According to Baker 1968, the nominals in 13 are analyzed as a concealed question, so a proper generalization would be that when the antecedent nominal is interpreted as a yes-no question, the VP in the second clause can be elided, but not if it is understood as a question for information. Consider a more interesting set of examples in 14. The same nominal survival in 14a does not allow VP ellipsis in the second clause. The same fact can be confirmed by the nominal resignation in 14b. Since the nominal in the first clause is not understood as a concealed or a polar question, but has something to do with the information, like manner or reason, VP ellipsis makes the string illicit. Okay, the remainder remaining part of this paper provides an attempt to explain the syntax of category mismatch in ellipsis with a specific focus on N to VP and V to NP ellipsis. The answer will be looked for in the spirit of previous approaches in terms of the size of a elided part, but one crucial difference from them is that the present proposal considers a more fundamental linguistic principle about derivational notion of phases. Section 3, proposed analysis. To explain the observed acceptability variation of category mismatch in ellipses, in VP ellipses, this paper looks for an answer from the phase theory. Differently from Chomsky's rigid notion of phase theory, the present study adopts the Boscovich and Dendikin's non-rigid definition of phases. To be concrete, this paper adopts the following disjunctively ordered disjunctively combining the proposals of Dendikin and Boscovich. 14. Disjunctive phase extension. Phasehood is yielded to a neighboring FP if the head of X of a phase moves up to F, or FP is the highest phase in the extended domain of X. Here, by yielding, this paper means that the former phase ceases to be a phase if its phasehood is given to a neighboring projection by either option of 15. An FP, if it turns out to be a phase, it can be counted in important syntactic operations like movement and ellipsis. Ellipsis is important here. To further strengthen the theory of phases, this paper, of course, adopts the phase impenetrability condition below, that's given in 16. And to further constrain the overgeneration, we adopt the one more condition called anti-locality condition and movement, which was given by Groman 2003 and Abels 2003. Movement must not be too local, so that there is no such movement from complement to its spec. This difference between movement ellipsis, however, can be captured in the spirit that the complement of a phase is special. It cannot be moved, it cannot be elided if conditions are met for each. This point makes a parallel situation if we consider complement of a phase head. It is well discussed in Boscovich and supported by later works by Umbrandt 2017. According to them, the complement of a phase head is not eligible for ellipsis, but is free to move to the edge position of a phase without violating anti-locality for movement. To recapitulate, the phase is accessible to movement by a probe from outside, but the complement of its head is not. The complement of the complement, however, is free to move if it stops by at the edge of a phase. And more importantly, for us, a phase and the complement of his head are eligible for ellipsis by the licensor from outside, but the complement of the complement is not. With this much preparation, let us get back to the category mismatch in ellipsis. Section 3.2 and to VP ellipsis. This paper proposes that the category mismatch in VP ellipsis can be handled under dynamic phase hood based and assumptions. For a proper morphological derivation, the root notation is adopted to note the lexeme status of a category. Root refers to a category neutral lexeme which will be realized as a surface category at the relevant point of a derivation. Look at 20 again. The lexeme survive will be realized either as a survive as a verb or survival as a noun. To take care of the idea that only nouns with a concealed polar interrogation can trigger VP ellipsis, pole P is located above VP in the second conjunct to carry the polar properties. So we have a precedence of a pole P head, sigma head by Laka or Paul head by Kolikover 1992. If polarity is not involved, pole P is not needed because pole is for a concealed yes-no question. Under the dynamic definition of phases, VP in the second clause can be elided if the clause has pole P because VP counts as the complement of pole P, which is a phase by definition. In contrast, the VP, the second clause, cannot be elided without pole P, since it's not a complement, but the complement of a phase. In other words, VP is the complement of T, in that CP is a phase, TP is its complement, and VP is the complement of T. This explains why VP ellipsis is not possible when the non-polar concealed questions of nominals are an antecedent. The assumption that ellipsis is done under syntactic non-distinctness if recoverability guarantees the identity between root survive and the lexical survive. This is probable in that the pivotal syntactic requirement of ellipsis is understood as a set of theoretic inclusion relation Wright and Harwood 2015, for example. The gist is that if the part of an antecedent clause includes that of an elided clause, but not the other way around. Because the root survive properly includes the verb survive, VP ellipsis can be done without problems. The same explanation holds for examples 1b and 1b versus 20 as well. The relevant part of the representation would be the following, given in 21. Pole P in 21a is a phase in that it carries the polar properties of the embedded CP, and pole head is not in head dependency to the lower VP head. In 21a, VP is the complement of pole P and therefore is eligible for ellipsis. In 21b, on the other hand, VP is the complement of CP, so it's not eligible for ellipsis as desired. More examples can be added in as given in 22. The agent nominal with ER suffix can antecede the elided VP in the second clause. This can be understood as additional conforming examples to the polarity added explanation. And also the same explanation holds again for 23, the rough representation of the relevant part of which would be the following: 23 and 24. In 24, VP is the complement of OP and therefore is eligible for ellipsis. Now, VP to NP ellipsis. Regarding the opposite direction, the relevant examples are reproduced in 25. As for 25a, avoiding the problem of regarding the pronoun one as a number head, this is different from Sato's analysis. This paper assumes that 1 is a little n, which is the head of a little np. Consider 26 for illustration. 27 is the postulated structure of DP for 26. In 26, all is a root category, as has been proposed by Chomsky, 2013 and 15. Above all P, NP, little np, and DP are kept in a row to host lexeme item. In 27, DP is a phase since it is the highest phrase in the extended projection of all. Ugly is a modifier which is joined to little np. The spec DP is occupied by a possessive. Under this structural architecture, 26a is grammatical in that little np, higher little np, is elidable since it is the complement of a phase head D, and Julie's is possible as the complement little np is elidable. In 26b, Julie's ugly one is the substitute for a picture of a cat, which does not bring about any problem. 26b has something to do not with ellipsis but with one substitution. The thing is that the one for substitution must be differentiated from the numeral 1, which is not carefully considered in Sato 2018. One has dual phases, as we know. To be concrete, one can be understood as either as the little n head or the substitute for the whole np. Now, turning to 25c, represented in 28, here little np is a phase in the same way as little vp can be a phase in a clause, and np is its complement, hence it is elidable. Okay, now consequences. In a word-based approach to category mismatch in VP ellipsis, the most important factor to be considered is a theoretic inclusion relation, that is a size matter. But the real question is whether the size is the only thing to be considered for the recovery of related information. Here are some examples, counterexamples that run afoul of the simple premise that size matters. Look at 29. 29b is understandable, but 29, why is bad? Why is it bad? The antecedent and elided part are structurally the same. 29a is not explained by a theoretic consideration alone, since AP is the same as the EP. Furthermore, there are some more variation. Look at 30. When the head of the preceding clause is a non-finite auxiliary, VP is inconsistently allowed in the target clause, which was noticed by Postum early in 1997. On top of them, more seriously, the following examples are tested when the elided is bigger than the antecedent, but the whole string is good. 31. Look at in 31, the elided phrase is definitely bigger than the simple VP of the antecedent phrase. The size consideration is intuitively correct, but it fails to find. If we fail to find a more deeply rooted explanation for the distinction, the intuition cannot be supported. For these reasons, this paper has attempted to find a solution from phases which are an indispensable chunk for language computation. As for 31, the representation of the relevant derivation of each would be roughly something like below in 32. In 32a, the elided part is the complement of prog p, which is a phase according to Haru 2015, so it is not bringing about problems. The same explanation holds for 32b and 32c. Now, let us discuss the proposal of this paper can take care of the examples that would be a problem to the approach that only considers size of ellipses. Look at 29b, which is reproduced in 33. Under the dynamic definition of phases, a TP is a phase because it is the highest phase in the extended domain of a lexical category V, which is discussed. In addition, if we also assume as a stipulation that the head of an AP is a non-finite auxiliary, which was noticed by Boston 1997, TP or prog P is a phase. If TP is a phase, then prog P is its complement, and the perfect P becomes the complement of the complement. The complement of a complement is by definition not eligible, as shown in F33. 34 satisfies the size condition because the elided part, perfect P in 34, is smaller than the antecedent phrase, but it violates a more important elidability condition on phases. As for 30, look at 35. In 35a, due to the presence of a modal P, the voice P counts as the complement of the complement, so that the voice P is not eligible for ellipsis. The same explanation holds for 34b. Due to the presence of a perfect P, prog P becomes the complement of the complement, so that prog P is not eligible for ellipsis, which is required by Boscovich 2012. Now, section 4 tries to explain the other mismatches, taking a polarity mismatch as an example. A polarity mismatch can be explained on the same track by the dynamic phases. 37 and 38. The reverse situation is given 38. Okay, I'm running up the because I'm running up the time. Let me stop here because the polarity mismatch explanation of polarity mismatch is just an attempt yet to be further explored and further articulated. So this is the end of my talk, and the conclusion is given, and the underlined part is the essence of what I have to what I have to tell you for the whole thing about, with a wrap up of the whole presentation. And thank you very much for listening.